For, I guess, exactly a week at this point. Mostly in ranked, although at this point, there's no difference between ranked and casuals literally at all, so it doesn't actually really mean anything. But we have gotten a good hold on kind of what gods are doing well in Smite right now. Like Smite 1, it would take a really long time after a big patch to figure out who's doing well and stuff because there's so many characters. But in Smite 2, the god pool is still limited. You very quickly find out who is overtuned and who is undertuned kind of thing, which is nice. What I will say is with my tier list, these tier lists are always focused on ranked gameplay. And that's because for the average player, ranked is the most competitive that you're ever going to play Smite. The average person is not going to play a competitive level of Smite. And people that play competitive Smite don't need help with a tier list. So this won't factor in, any competitive play or Paul wrecking with something or somebody. This is going to be purely focused on the gods that you can play in ranked to give you the best chance at winning in ranked at your various roles. So, without further ado, starting off with Anhur. Anhur is in a very good spot right now. Anhur is actually one of the gods that I would use for balancing around, as in his power level feels really solid. He's fun to play. His kit is rewarding. But when you pick him, it's not like they got Anhur, GG type thing. He is in a good spot. He's got a good base, and I actually think that he's a great way to look at a god for Smite 2 to try to be like, okay, how do we get this god's power level kind of up towards Anhur or down towards Anhur? He is in a very nice spot right now. Anubis is a tricky one because I actually think that Anubis is better than people are giving him credit for. But in ranked right now, the jungle is so strong. So strong. For those that don't know, thank you, Dunn. Wards only last 1 minute right now in Smite 2, which means that wards are essentially useless outside of throwing down a sentry ward directly on the fire to try to counter or something. So that means that ganking is crazy efficient. The jungle role is by far the strongest right now, and it's also the easiest to play. So gods that don't have an escape at all are heavily punished right now. So Anubis, while you can get combat blink, so can and probably will the enemy jungler. So for me personally, I think he would be an A tier character when I'm playing him. But for the average person, I do think he is providing more difficulty than some of the other characters because of his lack of a getaway skill. And that will be a theme throughout this tier list. You'll see characters that don't have a getaway skill probably ranked generically below other characters. And it's not that their kits are bad or anything. It's just that with the way the meta is right now, with the way wards are right now, with the way the junglers are right now, not having a getaway skill basically means you're a free kill on cooldown because towers also don't even do that much damage. So if you get back to your tower at 30% HP, you're just a free tower dive at that point. Aries is super interesting. Aries is one of my favorite gods in the game right now. He actually feels a lot better than he did in the previous alpha when he felt super jank. Still a little bit of janky on him, but to be fair, there's just a lot of generic and janky in Smite 2 right now. Aries is a god that once people figure him out, I think he could move up on this tier list a little bit. I'm going to put him in A tier. I actually think that his balancing is in a good spot. But the thing that will potentially make Aries busted, and I could see him thriving, particularly in competitive when you can rely on your teammates all the time, is actually the reworked Aries passive. So Aries passive, for those that don't know, is Aries now gives out intelligence aura to his team based off of the cooldown that he buys. And the more important one, he gives off a strength aura for buying protections. It is very reasonable for your Aries to be giving out somewhere around 80 strength in your game. 80 strength is basically like having the highest possible power item in the game If you're a hunter going a crit build, we're talking like 20 to 30 strength on your items. So we're talking Aries giving you the equivalent of like 2.5 items on the lower tier end for strength. That is a crazy diff. If you're rocking like a Soul or a Jingu ADC who's critting, so much damage coming off of that. And that doesn't even include the auto buff that you're getting with his 2. Aries is only limited by the fact that his most impactful thing that he does for the team relies on your teammates. His chains are still good. Everything else about his kit is still good. It's just that the thing that would really take him over the top is a purely buff for your teammates, but that does require your teammates to hit autos and abilities. You can give your ADC an extra 80 power, and on paper they should never lose a 1v1, but if they miss every single auto attack, it doesn't matter that you gave them an extra 80 strength because they did 0 bonus damage. So that's the catch with Aries right now. Athena is okay. Athena is one of the weaker supports. I still think that she's viable, right? Like, if you were in D tier, I would say that basically makes you not viable, right? But outside of that, she is viable. Definitely doing better in support than any other role. Athena's got a couple of issues right now. One is that her damage is just so much lower than all the other supports. And the game is very burst focused right now. Very 100 to 0. Very snowball. And getting ahead early is crucial. Athena doesn't thrive at that. If we can get out of this snowbally meta, if we can get some real matchmaking in the game, all of those things will help her because her late game is really cool. Still has those taunts, still really strong. She gets extra taunt duration now, scaling off of protections, which is a fun way to do protection scaling in Smite. But her early game is super lackluster. Her 1 feels really janky. It drives me crazy how bad her 1 feels. If you go use Athena 1 and Smite 1, it lands you directly on the target. If you use her 1 and Smite 2, it lands you like this far away from the target, which feels terrible. It feels awful. And I've told them about this for 4 months, and it's still not fixed, much like a lot of other bugs in Smite right now. It's driving me crazy, but that's okay. I don't necessarily think she needs a buff. I think she needs some bug fixes, and I think the meta just needs to change a little bit around her. Now for Bakus. I tweeted earlier today that there are 2 gods that are absolutely running the meta right now, and Bakus is one of them. He's a straight-up SS tier hero. The long and short of Bakus is that Hi-Rez is doing something with Bakus that they've tried for 11 years, and it's never worked. And what that is he gets damage by building protections. So earlier we talked about how Athena's taunt duration gets longer when she builds protections. That's really cool. She is getting a utility buff for building protections. Bakus gets straight damage. Straight damage. Your flop does extra damage based off of your protections. Your 1 chug gives you essentially what is a jacked, like Hydra's polyproct based off your protections. And then you can just build hybrid items. His passive is giving him percentage protections, which is then buffing the damage that he does. Not to mention, his passive also literally gives him strength and int, which is giving him damage. So if you've been run out by a Bakus that has 3,500 HP in a build with 5-6 protection items, and then a blue stone, he is going to 100 to 0 you, and he is going to take absolutely no damage because he's got built-in strength, built-in int, built-in percentage protections on physical and magical, built-in mitigations, not including the fact that all of his damage-based numbers are good. He's got a flop, which is the best we see in the game. He's got a stun. He's got an intoxicate. He's got a self-heal. He is one of the most busted characters currently in the history of Smite. The history of Smite. And that's saying something. We're talking like Guan Yu, Nemesis, like release style busteds. Ban him every single game unless you can pick him. Also, fun fact, works in any role. Bakus middle, go full tank. Bakus jungle, go full tank. Bakus support, believe it or not, full tank and a blue zone. Works in every single role. Yeah. I can't talk enough about him because it is hilarious. I don't know the last time I had less than 20 kills in a Bakus. Balana. Balana, another one of those gods, not vibing super hard right now. She is okay, but okay isn't really cutting it in this meta. Her early game clear is not terrible because of her hammer. It is, interruptible pretty easily depending on the lane matchup that you are against. You still obviously get the hammer autos afterwards, which is nice, but auto attack, the way that Balana is an auto attack solo, how like in Smite 1, you'd be in like an ability-based solo meta or an auto attack-based solo meta. We're basically in a ability-based solo meta. So the auto attackers like Balana, where she would like to, build like a berserker shield and that kind of stuff. Well, Kins is really bad right now. So that style of build, there's not an axe of animosity anymore. It's just the sundering axe. So that style of build just doesn't work super well. And because of that, Balana's getting punished. Her kit, once again, pretty much fine. I don't think there's anything directly wrong with it. It's just that her kit in this meta with these items is just not super flowing together. But all of a sudden, if Kins got buffed, and Berserker Shield became a really cool item, like all of a sudden, Balana becomes a good character, right? So, CERN is totally fine. If CERN and her, were against each other every game, you would have a very balanced ADC matchup. In general, the Hunters are good right now. Reminder that Smite 2 has no classes, so Hunter. But, we can kind of generically refer to them like it's Smite 1. The Hunter kind of archetype that you would expect, I guess I'll just say the ADCs of the world, are all doing well right now. None of them are bad, and that is because crit is the meta right now for ranged auto attackers. You might even see some fun meme builds with like Ymir crit and Zeus crit and the Morrigan crit because her passive can proc crits, which is hilarious. But because crit is so strong, it means that all of those characters that traditionally like a crit build aren't bad. It's just that when you compare her and CERN to a couple of the other options, they're really lackluster. Very balanced characters, cool kits, but there's some super overtuned ones right now. Chalk, another great spot for him. He's in a pretty good balanced spot. I actually think that Chalk's support is decent right now. While he works over in the solo lane, nothing wrong with a good old-fashioned Chalk solo. If you want a more damage-focused support, Chalk support is pretty interesting because his base numbers are so high. He's got the ultimate, which is very strong right now. For those that don't know, essentially all leaps in Smite 2 are bugged right now, which means that if you're in a leap animation, and you can still get hit by abilities. So for all intents and purposes, all leaps in Smite right now are being treated as dashes at least some of the time, even if it's not 100% of the time. So like if you're at the top of a Neath backflip and a Chalk ulti's below you, it is knocking your ass out of the sky and you're getting hit by the damage and you're silenced and you're screwed. So because of that, makes his ultimate really, really good when it was already really, really good. And all abilities can kind of work like that right now. So like you could be in the middle of like an Anher jump and get Bakus flopped out of the air. It's kind of a disaster, but it does help him quite a bit. And he's got a ton of build options. Chalk is one of the hybrid characters in the game. Hybrid characters are all viable right now because of the ability to either like stack Transcendence and Book of Thoth together or to go the Conch starter, which gives you strength, int, and HP, and then an aura, strength, and int. A lot of cool items right now for hybrid characters. Fenr, all the assassins are doing good. Not quite S tier, I would say. Down towards the balanced tier. Fenr does have counters, right? Cripples are still super annoying for him. Various forms of CC that get him out of his Brutalize are still annoying for him. But Fenr can go an auto attack build and go crit. His Brutalize can crit. He can go more power-based build. He can go a bit of a tankier build for a little bit more supporty, although I don't think it's that good, honestly. I do think the more traditional jungle power Fenr build is better. But Fenr is in a good spot right now. Gets a ton of lifesteal from his 2. Very noob-friendly character. Like, if you're new to Smite 2 and you don't know who to play, Fenr is actually a great god to go play right now. Brutalize is auto-lock on. He's got built-in, I want to say 25% lifesteal when you pop your 2 without even putting more than 1 point into it, which is crazy strong. He's got a leap to get away. He's got CC immunity on the ult. Very noob-friendly character and generically good. Now, this next pick is a little surprising to me, and maybe like in a month of hindsight, we would want to amend this. But as of right now, I'm putting Hades in A tier. I actually think Hades is perfectly balanced. If you would have asked me a month ago, I would have told you that Hades was the best character in Smite 2. I would have told you that. But man, after playing Smite for a week, when I play Hades, he feels really good. But then I watch every other person in ranked play Hades, and I go, I don't know, he seems fine. So I don't know if people just haven't caught on to his new kit yet and how to properly use it or to build him or whatever. But I can't necessarily just judge a character off of when I play them every time, because then I feel like all of these characters I would probably move up a tier kind of thing. But Hades does seem balanced. He works well in the mid and solo lane as a support. There's better options. Like, there is like a fun kind of tanky Hades build because of his heal and stuff. But he does seem to really thrive in the mid and the solo lane, where you can build a ton of damage, get a bunch of burst off, dive somebody with your ultimate, and then dive again, post with the secondary dash. Super strong. Very good early clear. Very good early sustain. I personally think that he should be performing better than he is, but not just going to, make up information because I think he should be doing better, So, now, characters that are not doing well at all. This is going to be my first C tier character. Now, Hakate's kit is really cool once you start getting your build going and you start getting into late game team fights. Really cool. Her ultimate, I feel like, is going to have crazy playmaking potential, and I could see her getting a lot of love at a competitive level. But here's the caveat. Her early game clear might be the worst in the game. She might have the worst level 1, like level 2, level 3 clear in Smite right now. It is atrocious. It is awful. And if you don't win that clear early, it means you're not getting the other mid camp. It means you're not getting the little gold. It means you're not getting the oracles. It means you're not contesting the 2v2s with your jungle. It means you're not getting a lot of farm. You're not getting a lot of XP. You're going to fall behind a lot. Not to mention, she has no true getaway skill, which means she is the easiest mid lane character to gank, maybe behind Zeus. Super easy to gank, particularly if you're going against like a Suzano or something. Like, good luck. You're going to get camped on cooldown. If you could consistently make it to the 20-minute marker in Smite right now and the game was even, I think she would be way higher on this tier list, because that's when her kit really starts to thrive. And to be clear, love the god, love the kit, super interesting, big fan of her kit. I just don't think that right now, with no matchmaking really in the game, with games snowballing out of control in the first 10 minutes, her coming online and really getting into form at the 20-minute marker is just not going to cut it right now. I have seen like maybe one Hekate out of 100 games do well right now. So I'm sure that Paul can play her like competitively and crush it and make her look like the best god in the game. But as far as ranked goes, super lackluster performance. Now, if you want the opposite of a lackluster performance, might I bring to you your other ban? It's Jingu, the other SS tier god in Smite 2 right now. Without a doubt, Bakus and Jingu are the two best gods in the game. Not particularly close. There is a third contender that under, I think, the right circle. maybe a third and fourth contender that under the right circumstances can encroach upon them. But I personally think that Bakus and Jingu are just a leap above the rest. For those that don't know, Jingu got a fairly massive kit rework for Smite 2. So her 1 now has a wider radius on it. That gives out the buff, so you don't have to self-knock yourself up to get the buff anymore, which is a massive buff to her buff. Her 2, and this is the real game changer. Her 2, you can potentially have 15 stacks of, which makes your autos hit harder, crit more, and are wider so they're easier to hit. You can have 3 stacks of it built up, plus 1 in the pocket, plus your dash resets 1 for an easy access to 15 enhanced autos, which in the late game will 2 to 3 shot a squishy. 2 to 3. Busted. Her dash is arguably nerfed, actually, from live client. Her dash can move around a little bit more easily. It's a little bit more fluid, but it's actually way slower than it was in Smite 1. So I actually consider that a nerf. But her ultimate can now do 2 times damage. Plus you can stay in it for twice as long because you ulti down, and then if you don't immediately land, you ulti back, which is crazy for tower dive potential. It's crazy for living because you can sit up in the air basically like a Rama ult and wait for your team. Incredible God has always been one of the best crit hunters in Smite as well. When crit metas are really strong, Jingu tends to be really strong, and crit is essentially the only viable build right now for ADCs. And guess what? There's like 80% crit chance in Smite right now if you were to buy every crit item. Most ADCs are buying 3 of them, giving themselves 60% crit chance, but then she has built-in crit, which means she can crit you more than the enemy ADCs, which means she basically wins every 1v1 as well. She's the one who crits. Very strong. Bakus and Jingu should basically always be your bans right now. Unless your first pick, in which case you can play fun mind games and you can try to grab yourself fun. Koken. I was a little harsh on Koken when the servers first went live. I saw a couple of Koken players. And this was before I knew that there wasn't really any matchmaking in the game. I was a little hard on him. I thought that he was trash because every Koken that I went against fed their brains out. As it turns out, it was just because they were probably new players. Koken's in a good spot. I can't give him S tier. But I would say I would like put him like over here though. You know what I'm saying? Like he's like top of A tier, not quite to S. But in fact, I can actually probably, while we're here, I can actually organize these. No, I'd say it like that. I'd say Hades probably moves up here. CERN probably down a little with Shock. I'm actually going to say, because there's not that many gods, I can actually kind of organize this in a fashion that makes a little bit more sense. So that way it's kind of like, the tiers, but then also like left to right as well. Anyway, that was a little sidetrack. Koken damage is nutty right now. Like really nutty. And he doesn't take a long time to get that damage online like say a Hakkar does. Bogathoth and Koken, and even stacking that with a Transcendence for the double mana whammy ka-whammy. He's the character that can get the highest int in the game. Very easy to get like 800 plus int on Koken, not even including like, Fire Giant buffs and 3k pots and that kind of stuff. Which means that he's an actual viable Polynomicon user. Poly is basically useless on most mids because you can't get enough int to make it super useful. But because of his passive, he can. So like his sneeze auto attack with the Poly feels genuinely very strong. His ultimate is maybe the weakest part of his kit right now. It doesn't feel like it hits nearly as hard as Smite 1 for whatever reason. I don't know if it's actually nerfed or if it's just kind of a vibes thing. But the big thing with Koken is he actually does have a getaway skill. For those that don't know, if you're inside of your tornado and you press your 2 goes from being Slither, a movement speed buff, to a dash, and that dash does damage. I want to say that the dash damage is almost exactly the same as your 1, which means if you 1 tornado and then 2, it's 100-0 on any squishy. Once you get to basically the mid to late stage of the game, very strong, not to mention very fun to dash at people with Koken and kill them. Underrated character, not the easiest to play, but very strong. Now for our first S tier character, it's Loki. He is not as strong as the Bakus and the Jingu, but Loki is unfortunately very strong right now. Loki's kit is basically the same as it was in Smite 1. His 2 is like a full-blown blind now. So it kind of like almost Shibalanke ulties your screen a little bit. So he's got that going for him. But the big thing with Loki is a combination of 1, jungling is kind of easy right now. 2, with no wards, his stealth is just like the freest ganks ever. Like if you're a new jungle player and you want to just focus on PvP, it's so easy to gank with him because you just stealth in the jungle where there's no ward. And then you walk into the lane where you're still in stealth, and then you pop up right next to the mid laner who doesn't have a getaway skill because they picked Akate. The freest character right now, unfortunately. And the big whammy kablammy for Loki is that every time you get a kill on Loki, your stealth resets, which means you basically get a kill and then you re-stealth, which gives you a ton of damage back, which gives you a kill, which then you stealth. And there's this cycle of just stealthing and killing and stealthing and killing and stealthing and killing, and you're always in stealth and you're always killing. Very annoying character. If Bakus and Jingu weren't in the game, he'd be a viable ban. But they are, so Mordred. I actually think Mordred is pretty balanced right now. I would put him up like here, a little bit better than some of those other characters, but Mordred is not an easy character to play. His kit might seem simple, but 90% of Mordreds feed their brains out because they think that they can kind of just King Arthur button smash. It's not really the way that he works. You almost treat him like a fighting game where it's like you get 1 auto off so you can get the heal on your 1 going, and then the enemy starts to run away, so then you can spacebar to chase them down with your little tiny shoulder push to get them knocked up in the air, and then you can pop your buff to get the AoE damage off, and then you can start attacking them, but then they start running away, so you hit them with your bleed. That way they run away, they're bleeding and taking extra damage. Like, his kit does require some forethought, and while he's not like the hardest god in the game to play, he's harder than people think he is. You can't just face roll the keyboard with him like you can with King Arthur, which I think a lot of people are trying to do. He is viable in multiple roles. I do think he's a better jungler than a solo laner right now, but he's viable in both because he does have some protection scalings on him. His biggest problem is that his ultimate is so buggy that it makes Morrigan's ult look not buggy, and her ultimate is horribly buggy right now. If his ultimate was consistent, I could see him maybe encroaching upon a slightly higher tier. He'd probably still be A tier, just like the very top. But his ultimate, half the time you use it, you go hit somebody, and then you just stand there and you do nothing for like 3 seconds. And it's like, well, that's tough. Neath. Neath is an S tier character. Neath is one of the better gods in the game right now, and one of the hardest hitting gods in Smite right now. She might be the hardest hitting burst god in the game. Her combo is crazy strong. She got so buffed from Smite 1. So for those that don't know, the traditional Neath combo in Smite 1 was pretty screwy because you had to use your backflip in order to put down a weave. And because you backflipped, now your weave is so far from you and you can't really get your combo off. Smite 2 Neath, on the other hand, you can root them with your arrow, then you pop your 2 puts down the weave, and then you can use your backflip to pop the weave. That means that Neath has nearly 100 to 0 potential at level 3. If you can get a couple of auto attacks in on the target, let's say you're against the mid lane Koken, if you get them down to 80% HP and then you land that full combo, they will die. They will die at level 3. The damage is insane. The other reason why she's so strong right now, she is a true hybrid character, and she can abuse the Thoth plus Transcendence build. Not to mention, she can also abuse the proc build with Soul Reaver and Heartseeker in Bluestone. The combination of those 5 items together is unbelievable. We're talking like over 1,000 damage without even trying Neath ults. We're talking about 100 to 0 combos, crazy global presence, crazy burst damage, and insanely safe. Because if you're playing her right, not only is your backflip going to get you to safety, not only does your backflip get over walls, but it also, procs the root when you have your weaves down. Unfortunately, she just doesn't stand up to Bakus and Jingu because Jingu 2-shot you, and Bakus actually takes no damage from her combo because he takes no damage from anybody. Odin. Odin is also down here in C tier. I think that Odin is the worst god in the game right now. So, he's to the right of Akate. Odin feels bad right now. I saw, just before we did this tier list, I saw my first ever positive KDA Odin in Smite 2. They still lost the game, but it was the first time I've ever seen a positive KDA Odin. He feels bad. His ultimate is basically useless because Phantom Shell is an active that you can get at level 1. So it's not like it's Smite 1 where like, oh, maybe they upgrade the Phantom Shell later. It is at level 1, they've already countered my ultimate. That sucks. So his ultimate is useless. His leap is fine. His shield is fine. His 3 is fine. Everything about him is like, okay. Nothing about him is great. He doesn't do a ton of damage. He's not particularly tanky at all. He's a better support than he is a solo. In solo lane, you just get out-cleared and killed on cooldown. At least as a support, there's a little bit more leeway for you. You can try to work with the ADC, throw out a buff or two. Yeah, Odin is the worst character in Smite right now. He's the only character that I would say is maybe kind of a throw pick. Hakkar, like I said, if you can get to the mid game and your team hasn't absolutely gotten plowed into the floor, then all of a sudden she's super cool, right? But Odin is just there's no reason to pick him right now over any other character. He just is always a worse option. Soul, another S tier character. Soul is very good right now. Very good. As it turns out, if you combine Soul's passive, which makes her auto attacks one of the hardest, if not the hardest hitting, technically I think second hardest hitting autos in the game behind Ymir. And then if you combine that with crit, you get 400 damage crits at the 9-minute marker. When people have 1,000 HP. Very strong character. She's got built-in CC immunity with her ultimate. She's got built-in Aegis with her 3, which is, nice because Aegis you can't basically get anymore as an active because then you're choosing Aegis over beads and combat blink, which is psychopathic. Her 1 is a bigger radius when you built up your heat, so it's easier to hit. Her 2 still does great damage. It's great poke. It helps you get into the range of the auto attacks. Really, the only person that she can lose to in a 1v1 with other ADCs is Jingu, because Jingu's autos are easier to hit because of her 2. Plus, she has an additional crit chance, which means that if you both have 1 crit item, Jingwei basically has 2 crit items, so you essentially lose the boxing match every single time. But she's the only person that can attempt to box into a Jingwei. So they've got a Jingwei ADC on the team. Highly recommend picking Soul. She's your best option because if you do get a lucky crit or 2, or maybe your support helps, get Jing just a little bit behind an XP, Soul can actually take the 1v1 to Jingwei because of her enhanced autos as well, the way that no other hunters can. Soul is also an incredible mid lane, so you can run her there as well. Also fairly safe in the mid lane, comparably to like some of the other characters, because Anubis and Zeus are kind of just stuck there, but at least you've got your 3 on Soul to try to give you a little bit of movement speed to try to fight back and get into the immunity. Suzano, very strong right now. I don't know if I'd say he's stronger or less strong than Loki. Maybe less strong than Loki right now. But Suzano, very strong right now. You're going to see a theme where you got a lot of, assassins that are pretty damn good. Like Fenr is probably the worst of them, and he's an 8th tier. Still very respectable. Any god right now that jungles is basically viable because the jungle role is just so strong. Suzano has good CC in his kit. His passive got reworked, and his passive is super strong now, where basically you're applying a bunch of debuffs on the enemy target, including at the highest tier, a debuff that just makes the enemy take 10% more damage. That's real nice. He's got several movement abilities. He's got a pull. That pull right now, as a form of CC, is incredibly strong because, as aforementioned, a lot of people don't have escapes right now in Smite, which means if you pull them out of position, they basically have to use their 4-minute cooldown combat blink or die. Only thing about Suzano is that his ultimate is like a little baby knockup. It's like a little baby knockup. It can't be buffed right now. It can't be buffed because his kit is so strong, but like Suzano's knockup on his ultimate is kind of like you can hear like a little fart be let out with the amount of knockup that it is. I want to say it's the less height than like your jump gives you, but the rest of his kit is so strong you can't possibly buff that knockup without nerfing other things at the same time. Thanatos is good. Until recently, I would have put him up there with Loki and Suzano, but he's not S tier. He's A tier. He's viable, and he's over here further on the left-hand side. He's actually really strong in this current iteration of ranked, because what does Thanatos love? Thanatos loves to get big early. He loves to fight early. He loves to snowball, and he loves to gank. Well, his scythe makes him really hard to 1v1 as long as you hit it. His silence is essentially instant nowadays. For those that don't know, the animation on his 3 is basically gone at this point, so it might as well be instant. He's got built-in flat pen. The built-in flat pen is huge because the only way to get flat pen is to get a fully stacked one of the stacking items, Devo Trans and Boogathoth, which takes time, which means he actually gets flat pen earlier than basically anybody else in the game right now, which also helps those early game fights. And of course, his ultimate will always be good. Now, I find that his team fight potential as the game goes on, not as good as the Loki, not as good as the Suzano. They've got a bit more of a team fight impact at the end, but Thanatos always one of those gods that can hyper carry by himself because you get a kill and basically full heal and get a kill and basically full heal, and you just kind of keep that path going. But if I have to be honest, I have seen much better, much more consistent performances from Loki's and Suzano's than I have from Thanatos's at this point in our ranked. Now, for Morrigan is interesting because she's kind of busted and kind of bad at the same time. I'm going to put her kind of just over here in the middle of the pack of A. Morrigan got a change to her passive. First of all, it does a ton of damage. It's like 9% HP on her passive on that third auto tick. But more importantly, her auto attack when you get that third tick for the bleed, actually pops her 2, which means you don't have to 2-1 or 2 and then wait for another 2 to come up. 2 and then auto attack will pop it for the bonus damage, which is huge for her boxing. Her boxing is so much stronger than it used to be. Her lane clear is strong, but she does have a couple of problems. There does seem to be a stealth bug right now with Loki, which I think also affects Morrigan, where it can just take you out of stealth randomly, which is much more impactful for Morrigan than it is for Loki, because Loki can like ult you away or something, but Morrigan's just like, oh, here I am, guys. Morrigan's 1 is still a little finicky, and while you can combat Blink in the middle of a channel, so Chalk in the middle of his ulti can combat Blink. Ymir in the middle of his ulti can combat Blink, although Ymir ulti is bugged. Morrigan, if she blinks with her 1-up, it does take your 1 away, because it's not like a true channel. So you can't do like a blink with Morrigan with your 1-up, stun somebody, then hit him with the auto 2 for the polyprocs, which would help her a lot. And her ultimate is just buggy. It just is, man. Sometimes you ultimate into a target and you just don't have abilities to use for a couple of seconds. Sometimes you deform back into Morrigan. You don't have abilities to use for a couple of seconds. Sometimes you ulti on Morrigan and you can't move your camera as the transformed character more than like this far. You can move like 5 degrees to the left and right for a couple of seconds. A lot of problems right now with her ultimate, which make her fairly inconsistent. One cool thing with her ultimate, though, is you do get the enemy's consumables and their active. So if you like ulti into somebody and they've got wards, you can place down their wards, which is super funny. And you can use their active and it's a different active timer than the one that you're using. So if you were to say transform into Chalk with a combat blink, you could then combat blink. And when you transform into Morrigan, your active is still up if it wasn't, on cooldown beforehand, which is really nice. So with a couple of bug fixes and with a couple of changes, she could be a menace because her late game does one-shot. Old school Morrigan 100-0 out of stealth. It exists in Smite 2 right now. So watch yourself. Ymir. Ymir is a cool character. Ymir is strong, but he's not quite S tier strong. But I do think generically the average player is probably going to have a better time with Aries support than they are with they're going to have a better time with Ymir support than Aries support, but they're like around the same tier, and none of them are coming anywhere close to Bakus, obviously. Ymir also has a couple of different roles that he can play, which is nice. Ymir crit jungle, while I don't think is meta, is fun as hell. Ymir solo is actually good because of his boxing potential with his passive. He does really well over in solo with the generic tank build. As a support, of course, he works. His wall is very strong right now. All of his abilities feel good, except for Ymir has a massive bug with his ultimate, unfortunately. If you've been playing Ymir lately, and you've been clicking your ultimate, and you're like, wow, I don't remember double-clicking my ultimate. That sucks. I guess I fat-fingered it. You didn't. There's a bug with Ymir ult right now where it essentially pops itself. It seems to be that if you take damage during Ymir ult, it seems that every instance of damage has a chance to prematurely pop your Ymir ult, which is awful. Which means that if you're trying to like channel it for the slow and the damage for somebody to the edge of the ring, it can just pop, and sometimes it's instantly after you click the button. We're talking like a 0.1 second Ymir ult, and it is truly awful for Ymir. So that bug is keeping him from greatness because it really, really is messing with his full damage potential. So if that gets fixed, he could potentially be even stronger. But I mean, your ultimate, much like Morrigan and Mordred, like your ultimate is your best ability, and if your best ability is bugged and isn't working consistently, like it's hard to get to be higher rated. Like consistency is key. Finally, Zeus. Zeus down here at the bottom of B tier. Not quite on Hecate Odin level, but definitely not as good. as some of the others. Wow. Perfectly symmetrical. That's hilarious. Yeah. Didn't even realize that it ended up being like that, but literally perfectly symmetrical. That's so funny. Zeus was really strong in a couple of alphas back because of the way that his autos worked and his abilities worked with crit. We also made a middle finger. We did. It's a flipping off tier list. It is. What a flipping tier list. But Zeus crit is not nearly as good as it was. And Zeus crit was actually the thing that made Zeus good a couple of alphas back. His ability base has never been incredibly strong. And that's because his clear is actually difficult to use. While he has great damage in the 1v1 in the mid lane, right? Great damage. If you get caught off with 3 stacks on you and he detonates and stuns you, you're in trouble because his damage with those autos get thick, especially in the early game. But he has to walk all the way up to the middle of the wave to effectively clear by using his 2. So he's massively out of position. So if you're playing a Neath, you literally just root him and one-tap him. That doesn't even include the fact that the jungler is going to be there. He has no getaway skill, no CC, nothing to deal with the jungler because he's not going to get 3 stacks on the jungler instantly for a stun, which means if the jungle shows up in the mid lane, you're essentially dead on cooldown unless you're playing the game under tower. And if you're playing the game under tower, you're not getting any of the bonus farm, which means you're falling behind a ton on gold and XP. So guys, this is our first Smite 2 ranked tier list. Let me look over this one more time to see if I'm happy with everybody. Odin and Hakkar at the bottom. Yep. Then Zeus, Balana, Athena, and Anubis. Honorable mention for the Anubi, like I said. For me personally, Anubis would be an A tier character when I'm playing him. But just Anubis is just getting like if you're a newer player, Anubis he's too tough for new players to play. And so there's a lot of new people coming into ranked. In your positioning with Anubis just has to be so good. And you can't eat any cookies either. If you eat a cookie, you're in trouble. Then we got the Fenrir, the Chalk. Fenrir is better than Chalk probably right now just because he's a jungler. Cernunnos and Anhur. Yep, very good. Morrigan and Aries with Mordred, Hades, Thanatos, Ymir, and Koken. This middle tier is a little bit more swappable. Like if somebody was like, I don't know, man, Aries support is maybe a little bit better than Hades because of the counters. Like, I could see that. That's a little bit more swappable within the A tier range itself. Then at the S tier, Sol, Suzano, Loki, and Neath, 100%. Those gods are just a tier above the rest, except for, of course, Bakus and Jingu, who, when they're in your games, they're just a menace. I mean, these characters are going 20-1 every single game. You can try to camp Jingu early, at least. There's something to try there. Bakus, there's just nothing you can do about him because he's so tanky so early and he does so much damage. He has so much CC just within his first 2 abilities. Absolute menace to deal with. You better be banning him every single game, guys. And that is our first Smite 2 ranked tier list. Hopefully, if you're new to Smite 2, hopefully if you're new to ranked, this gives you an idea of the type of gods to be playing. Some of them viable in multiple roles, some of them only viable in one role. But generically, this list will do you good for picking your characters. And if you're in charge of banning, it'll also help you with banning with that kind of top echelon of character as you learn which ones you truly hate the most and which ones you like to play the most, which factors into your bans. Because if you're like, I could play Jingu every single game and I'm first pick, then you don't need to ban her because you can just pick her every single game. And that's totally cool. But if you're like me, you will get very bored of playing the same character over and over again. So you just got to start banning them because it's like I can't play more than two games a day of the same character or I'll go crazy. I'll go absolutely. Thank you for supporting the Twitchiest community. If you'd like to see more videos, make sure you subscribe to the channel and always hit that bell for notifications so you don't miss any of the upcoming videos. Thank you for all your support and have a Twitchin' day, y'all.